Hello again, everybody. It's your old pal, Guardian Enzo, coming to you live on tape from beautiful downtown Kyoto, Japan. And this time we're going to do our second Lost in Anime Patron Pick episode. This time you chose Smoking Behind the Supermarket with You. Seinen Manga, which has won the Next Manga award. It won that in 2022, and it was the eighth place in the Manga Taishou a couple of years ago. So it's got quite a bit of recognition from the on the critical side, and it's also a good seller. And this is by an author called Jinushi. And Jinushi does both the art and the story here. And it started as a web comic, and eventually it moved into Big Gangan magazine, Square Enix's Big Gangan, which is a great magazine for quality. There's a lot of wonderful titles that come out of there. The series is up to 7 volumes now, and there is, in fact, an anime coming in 2026. We'll touch on that a little bit later. We know nothing about that anime at this point, by the way, not even the studio, but we know it's coming. Basic synopsis of Smoking Behind the Supermarket with You is... two main characters are a salaryman named Sasaki in his mid-40s, kind of overworked and stressed out and just generally kind of a schlump. And then a young woman in her early 20s who works at the supermarket named Yamada, although that gets a little complicated. And she goes for smokes in like an employee area behind the store, and he ends up joining her for a smoke there one day, and the rest, as they say, is history. And before we jump in on this, Samu, I'll give you the opportunity before we go into story and character and such. Do you have any general thoughts on this series that you'd like to share?
I would say for a series which is about smoking, which is something that I do not like in real life. Yeah, I think it's a nice premise. I wasn't aware of well, you alluded to the switch in the name. Actually wasn't aware that was part of the dynamic we had going into it. So yeah, that kind of took me by surprise, and then I realized, oh wait, this dynamic is here to stay. So yeah, I have thoughts on that, so I'm sure we can get into that.
Yes, indeed, we do have some thoughts on that. In the first place, anytime you have a series where you have characters, the two main characters are so different in age, and both adults, there's kind of an inevitable question people are going to have about whether that's going to be headed in a certain direction. And that's obviously kind of the elephant in the room for much of the story. We'll get into the spoiler section later. But the other thing I will say is, like you, I mean, I admit I partake in a cigar occasionally, but cigarette smoking is something I not only don't do, but I find kind of gross, and really can't even go to a bar or restaurant where smoking is allowed. And yes, we just still do have quite a few of them here. But I do want to talk about smoking because I think if the potential relationship is the elephant in the room with this series, I kind of wonder if the smoking is the elephant in the room too. Maybe there's two elephants in there because, smoking is a bad thing. Smoking cigarettes is unhealthy. It causes people all kinds of health problems and death. And secondhand smoke is bad for people. And it costs society a shit ton of money through medical costs and early retirement and all kinds of things. So that issue, I guess that could go in the spoiler section, but I'll spoil it here. In the portion of the story that's out now, which is 7 volumes, there's really no direct acknowledgement of smoking as like a negative thing. And in fact, at one point, Sasaki initially gets a diagnosis from his doctor that says he should quit or severely cut down. And then he comes back like a couple panels later, says, oh, it was a mistake. My lungs are in great shape. And he just keeps on smoking, no problem. So, Samu, do you have an issue with that not being addressed in the series? How foul and unhealthy a habit smoking is?
I don't think I have a problem with it per se. I think I'm able to buy into the image it sells of how it's like cool smoking could be, and like how this chill environment is where their relationship thrives. Yeah, I think I'm okay with that. Like I in real life, if I applied it in practical terms, I think they probably both stink, which is actually brought up a couple of times
It
as
is.
well. Yeah, I do have a feeling this is purely speculation because the series is ongoing. I do wonder if the smoking, if there's going to be some sort of like resolution or like agreement between them, depending on which direction their relationship goes. Will the smoking be like a way to cap off this like dynamic, this space that they have together? Maybe that's more of a spoiler discussion, but yeah, I feel like maybe this
No,
is something that could be addressed at the very, very end of the series. But for now, they're kind of just like, yeah, this is the vibe that they have. And yeah, what you were saying about the smoking as well, my experience of being in Japan and going into clubs and bars and finding that there's like a smoker and non-smoker section, and there's
like that helps.
an invisible divide, which is like an arbitrary line between tables, and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, this is the whole place is smoking at this point.
Yeah, and it's frankly gross. And there are places that have like sealed off smoking rooms with like massive amounts of ventilation, which, that's a different story. But that's, especially for bars, that's definitely not the standard. Yeah, I've often wondered that too, whether that was something that might pop up towards the end of the series, and that could go in a couple different ways. Maybe we'll address that more in a little bit. The other main non-spoiler factor we'll get into, and it's not a spoiler because it really happens almost at the beginning of the series, is Sasaki. He initially goes to the supermarket because Yamada-san is such a cheery, bright cashier, and he really likes dealing with her. It brings like a special light to his day. And he does not initially realize that the woman he's smoking with behind the supermarket is the same woman, because she kind of frumps herself up and ties her hair back and puts on a totally different personality, which is in fact her real personality, which is kind of part of the gist of the story. But so that woman takes on the name Tayama-san. And so Sasaki believes that Tayama and Yamada are two different people. And this is established within the first couple of chapters. So there is a misunderstanding trope here where this ruse goes on where, she's the same person and he thinks it's two different people. And that is a trope we've seen in rom-coms before, to be sure. Now, the angle that they take on it here is interesting in that, from a psychological standpoint, in looking at her, because again, they represent, and anyone who's ever worked in retail kind of understands this. There's like a certain face that you put on, and it's not necessarily your real face. And that's kind of what it is with her. And it goes deeper than that, but that's kind of how it starts out initially. So do you feel at all bothered by the fact that the premise relies so heavily on what is a fairly cliched rom-com trope?
Yeah, I don't think I have a problem with it. I mean, like I said, I wasn't aware that that was going to be such a central part of the series and their dynamic. I think what I found was, especially in the first volume, which makes sense because it did start off as like a Twitter Pixiv series that was online before it eventually got serialized, like you said. It was very much played for gags. That whole first volume was very short chapters and not really substantive in terms of progress or actual things happening. It was just the hijinks of this situation they both found themselves in, and it definitely played into that misunderstanding in a way that was largely funny. I think maybe as I went on further with the series, I maybe became a bit tired with how it was being continued, because it is one of those things where it's like, really, bro? There's another red-haired employee that you've never seen the two of them together, but somehow you know that they're both working the same shift together. Yeah, there's a part where you have to just like stretch your believability on like how this.
Suspension of disbelief.
Exactly, yeah. But I think what I found, so I will say yes, there is a portion of the series where I was a little bit peeved off at that, though I think the series is acknowledging that in of itself, and the fact that Sasaki misunderstands this with Yamada isn't actually one way, because we also find out that Yamada also has a misunderstanding about a certain man that she saw before who feels obvious
Mm,
to the reader. But
yes.
then it becomes sort of like, oh, really? So they're both just a little bit silly and not picking up on the obvious, which uh, I think adds to the dynamic that gets fleshed out further on. Which, yeah, that's spoiler territory, but
Yeah.
yeah. So basically, I think it was a nice premise for the beginning, and I think maybe it dangled the carrot in front of us a little too long, where I was like, okay, now you have to kind of take it seriously at this point.
And you were the one who pointed this out, is that initially that switch from as a talking point, that switch from being a web manga to being a published print manga, and it is very very like light switch apparent when it goes from being very kind of jokey and just short little comic interludes to being something much more substantial. So the only thing I would go deeper on that is, do you think that this was something that the author and or editors kind of had an idea might be happening all along, and this shift was sort of always in mind? Or do you think that it was like, holy shit, this thing is getting pretty popular, and the author had to dig deeper than they ever expected to dig?
Uh, I genuinely feel like the way the series evolves, changes in tone, and kind of looks on itself in hindsight. I think none of this was planned. I think it has changed in some ways, and there are things that happen or that are alluded to where I was expecting it to lean more into the gag, where it's found, I think, more of a heart and um, more of a. It's taking a different direction than I would have predicted based on reading the first volume or the second volume. Yeah, I think
It,
there's just a natural evolution that has happened in terms of tone, which I'm glad for, because I don't think what we got in volume one would have been that entertaining even for 7 volumes that we have now. And after that point as well, that there's a shift that it's quite ironic for a series that is about smoke breaks. There are so many interludes and extra chapters where those are like the equivalent of like a smoke break from the actual chapters that are happening.
mm, mm.
I remember from that point I was like, Jesus, there's more interludes than there are actual chapters.
Smokers do get extra breaks, so which is something one of the characters point out. And by the way, that always pissed me off when I was an hourly employee, when smokers would get more breaks than I did because they said I needed to take a smoke break. But let's leave that where it lies. So let's talk about a couple of supporting characters before we get into more spoiler stuff. So one of the important supporting characters here is Goto-san, who is the manager of the supermarket. I want to get your general thoughts on Goto-san. But one of the things with Goto she talks about, I don't know, Samu, I don't recall whether you've ever worked, in a cafe or a bookshop or a retail store, but she talks about work tribes actually. And she has one employee who's rather awkward and struggles to interact with people. And Goto is kind of a smartass generally as a character, but she gives him what I thought was some very good advice. She said, "Find your work tribe. Don't worry about the whole office. Don't worry about the whole company. Just find your tribe and establish yourself with that tribe and get comfortable with that family of people, and that'll take you to the next level socially." So I don't know if that was very much my experience when I was his age and working in those kinds of environments. I was wondering, do you have any similar experience personally, and then just generally your thoughts on Goto-san?
I like her. She's a good. Maybe I thought she was kind of going to be more of an active participant in like championing romantic development between the characters, but I like that she enjoys watching from behind the scenes and seeing things play out. Yeah, and she keeps it real. She doesn't like take shit. I like her, and I was actually shocked with the age reveal that we did get of her in the beginning. And originally, I was like, okay, this supermarket just has lots of 20-year-olds working at it, and I was like, oh no, no.
How old did they say she was? I don't remember that part.
I believe she's in her 40s as well, or early
Yeah,
50s. But I
I
remember it
wouldn't have
flash.
said 50s, but yeah,
She's
she
around
plays older
Sasaki's
to me.
age.
Yeah, she plays older to me. She looks younger, but she acts older.
Yeah.
And I think with regards to like relationships generally, she's clearly in this for the lulls. I mean, her main interest for most of the series is really in the entertainment value these people can provide her, which I think makes her kind of interesting as a character. Which is not to say that she doesn't have feelings and she's a bad person, because none of those things are true. But for large chunks of the story, she basically is in this just to see how much entertainment value she can get out of it.
We actually do get a nice little, what could be a bit more for her in terms of romantic interests. I don't know how that's going to play out, but yeah, so there might be more for her in the coming chapters.
Could be. Let's talk about it. I'm going to save most of the discussion of this side character for the spoiler section, but Kamiyama-san, is that her name, Kamiyama, or was it, I forget now.
Kawakami.
Kawakami, that's her. I find her to be incredibly annoying, just personally. I don't know what's your feeling on. Everyone calls her Kami-san, including Sasaki, which she hates. I think he thinks it's actually her name, actually. But what is your generally feeling about Kami-san? What do you think about her as a character?
I'm not annoyed by her. I think her inclusion feels like, I've seen this trope before. Maybe someone that is introduced to shake up the status quo, maybe push characters a certain way. Yeah, she acts as an opposing force. And genuinely, I think that we get some exploration her eventually that I'm like, you know what? Maybe I buy that that's why you are the way you are. I can't say that I'm as annoyed with her as you are in that way.
Well, fair enough. She is very tropey, though, and as you say, I'll get more into that later. But the role she fills. A couple quick points. There is, as we said, an anime coming up in 2026 sometime, and we don't know at this point what studio it is. There's no casting information. We don't know who's directing. But the presumption, because it is seinen, is probably one core, most likely. Although the manga is popular enough that you could theoretically see what I'm almost wondering might happen. I know you have your theories on where it might stop. Maybe around what we would be almost the halfway point of the series. Now, I'm thinking it might be fairly close to an ending, but in which case you might see the whole thing adapted in two cores. And if the production committee knows that the author is planning to end it fairly soon, again, this is in the spoiler section, that may be something that's in the consideration. But any just general thoughts on the anime and anime pacing before we move into spoilers?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how this gets adapted. It is a case where, especially in the beginning, since it's so many just short chapters, I also think of like a series you love, Bokuyaba, and how an anime can kind of piece that together, and something also like Takaki-san.
Yes, Takagi-san is exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, that's a part where you kind of have to like wait and see how is an anime going to make the threads connect between these things, especially in a series where the setting is almost the exact same every chapter, and they're talking about similar things every chapter. So yeah, I'll be curious to see if it feels like a drag. That was not an intended pun, or if it or if it does a good job of finding that balance between these like snippets and conversations that they have. But yes, I do think that if it's going to be one core, I can see where it's going to end. And if it is going to be two cores, it would probably have to wrap up kind of soonish. Yeah.
We're going to jump into the spoiler section now, so just officially. But I will say, I have just a general suspicion that this is the sort of series that will probably work quite well as an anime. That's just what my gut is telling me. It just feels like the flow, like the structure, the vibe. I feel like this is something that will work very well in anime form. I do, however, think it needs a really solid director. And maybe when we get into the recommendations section, that may be something, ironically, that we touch on a little bit. But I think for this sort of story, a really good director is going to be important, because it's all going to be in getting the details just right. You can't hide behind the big battles and the special effects, which you have to get right with something like My Hero Academia or something like that. But you have to get all the little pieces perfectly. when you're adapting a story that's just about a couple people sitting and talking to each other most of the time. And that's a lot harder than most people realize, actually. And I often think that anime directors make the biggest difference in that sort of series as opposed to bigger so-called series. All right, let's jump into spoilers. And so the first thing I want to say in the spoiler section, let's talk about Sasaki's age, because there is a romance angle here. I mean, I guess we can call that a spoiler, but I mean, inevitably it was going to go that direction. I personally find, now I understand that even with seinen and josei, there's a general trend that just the establishment in manga is to treat anyone over college age as being like elderly. But the amount of times Sasaki in his mid 40s gets referred to as an old man in this series, including by himself, is really, 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 I mean, it's striking. I mean, it's like obsessively over and over every chapter, old man, old man, old man. Do you feel like there's anything more to that messaging wise, or is that just something that the author kind of falls back on as a sort of a comedic crutch, and often a dramatic crutch too? Why is this obsession with Sasaki's age when he's frankly, middle-aged, but certainly not old?
I think I just took it more as the viewpoint of these young people that work at the supermarket and just maybe their ignorance or their view of age. Because when you think about it, half the series does have characters that are Sasaki's age or older, who are like recurring characters as well. And I don't feel like they really get that treatment at all, or ever, in fact. I think because we're so obviously seeing this age gap dynamic between Sasaki and Yamada, that it highlights it, I think, just for comedic effect. And I think in terms of the age gap, I don't really have a problem with it. I think, at the beginning of the series, they're 45 and 24. I think the reason why I don't have a problem with it is because, yes, there's an age gap, but there's also the power dynamic between them, although there isn't anything actually structurally between them, but like the way in which how conversations are led and who's doing the pushing and who's doing the pulling, that it's Tayama Yamada who's doing who's the more forceful one when it comes to that sort of romance being built up. So it doesn't ever feel weird or skeevy or anything like that. So on that front, I've actually never had a problem with it. And I think actually having someone with that sort of maturity is a good thing for her character from what we've seen of her so far.
Well, I agree with that. Like I said, nobody refers to him as an old man more than himself, which maybe says something about his psychological state of being, I guess. So on the subject of the age difference, okay, let's jump right into that minefield. I'm curious, maybe this was more of an American thing or maybe not, I don't know, but are you aware of the half plus 7 rule?
Yes, I do know about that.
Okay, maybe it's not an American thing then. So, I mean, I imagine most of our readers probably do, but for those that don't, the half plus 7 rule basically says that it's okay to date a person if they're half your age plus 7. So if you're a 21-year-old, you can date basically an 18-year-old. If you're a 40-year-old, you can date a 27-year-old. That's the idea. So with these two, Sasaki's 45 and Yamada's 24 when the series started, as you said. So if you want to apply that rule, it's a fail. Now, getting past that, you've already made your point clear that you don't have a problem with it. I don't think I do either. But I do think there are definitely cases when we were talking about 45 and 24 where I would. And it just depends on the situation. And now, as you say, in the dynamic in this pair is because Sasaki has such low self-esteem, and she does too, but she manifests it in a different way than he does. So the fact is, she is the assertive one in the relationship most of the time, whatever that relationship is as it evolves. So she has hand, as George Costanza would say, in the relationship. So I guess I don't have a problem with it, and I don't think the half plus 7 rule is necessarily something I believe should be universally applied. When this does become an anime and a more kind of a well, let's just say, frankly, because it's true, probably a less literate and less discerning audience, or at least portions of it, jumps into this. Do you think that the age gap is going to prove controversial with anime viewers?
I think it's going to be one of those things where episode 1 and 2 is going to come out and people will talk about it for that reason, and then the people who watch it will continue watching it. And I think in the first place, those who would complain about it, or just it's not their kind of thing, which is fair, they wouldn't have read it or watched it to begin with. I don't think so. I don't think it
But I
really
think they'd be
changes.
more likely to. I think they'd be more likely to watch it than read it, though. Just to be clear.
Yeah, yeah. I think if you're someone with that is such a like reason to not consume it, I think you'll probably just get the very early stages of loud noise about it. But I think why it doesn't, especially as the volumes go on and it gets deeper into this dynamic, which is kind of fluffy and poking fun of each other, or her poking fun of
Hmm.
him for the beginning,
Yeah,
is that
pretty much.
they are both kind of emotionally stunted in different ways, and I think that lends into this sort of like even playing field in that sense, because Sasaki, especially as we get to know more about him, is that he's called lazy, which you could also translate as like weak in terms of pushing something forward.
Yeah.
He's so content with keeping things the way they are that he will never
Hmm.
strive for what he thinks he actually wants or should do. Versus you have Yamada, who I think we actually know even less about her, because the other characters have
I
said
agree.
she doesn't open up about any of these things. You get that scene later on in the playground, which is one of the only moments where you
Hmm.
get a hint of like realness about her, because she works in this customer service role, which is all about presenting a front, and she gets a kick off having that sort of dynamic where she's playing the role of Yamada and the tell to Sasaki, but then behind the scenes she's this Tayama person that she's splitting these two characters up, and everyone it's funny that everyone goes along with it actually, but the fact that she feels the need to do that, I think, is not by accident. And I think we're at a stage in the series now where we're really going to get into the part where we find more about her, which is why my general vibe is, like I touched on in the non-spoiler section, I found it funny in the beginning, and then for a few volumes I was like, okay, now I'm like, it's like stretching out a bit more than I thought I was getting. But the last two volumes really got me back in, and yeah,
Hmm.
there are developments where, like when it comes to Sasaki figuring out who is Yamada, who is Tayama, uh, that was one where I thought it was going to be some big funny reveal, and I was like, "Oh, aren't I a doofus? I didn't pick this up." But no, it kind of is a slow realization that he kind of comes to without it
Hmm.
really being addressed with the reader. And then at the same time, all the other characters and Yamada, the lie kind of blurs, and then realization maybe eventually happens. But I think in the fact that they were seeing uh, what was initially his infatuation with Yamada, then translating onto an actual feelings for Tayama, I
Hmm.
think that's the best part of their dynamic as well. Yeah.
Yeah, when we get that later on in the story, where we get that first insight into her in the playground. Well, you do mean later, because that was like the penultimate chapter that's been released. That was like 51, I think, out of 52 as we record this. Um, I think it's no coincidence, as you said, that she does this kind of split off of herself, because she's not comfortable with who she is. She doesn't like who she is. So this act of splitting herself into two different people, from existentially, that's easy for her. That makes her life easier, because she can kind of compartmentalize. She doesn't have to face the things about herself that she doesn't really like, um, which is interesting. I think is genuinely interesting. I also think it's, the irony of the situation is, she's pretending theoretically to be someone she isn't for Sasaki, when in fact the pretend person is the real person, and the real person is the pretend person. Tayama is the real person, even if Yamada is the real name, let's say. So for her, like I said, it's comfortable to do that because she's not happy with who Yamada-san is, even if she is good at faking it for customers. She even gets an award. But the reality is that's not healthy in the long term. And I think the story kind of acknowledges that. And as we go forward, now we're at the point now where it's clear he knows, and he officially knows relatively recently within the last few chapters, but there's no question he knows. So I'm going to pose three questions to you then, and we'll kind of, first one is it realistic that he would not have figured this out for so long? I would kind of vote no on that, but again, suspension of disbelief. So the next question, I guess the next question that ties into that, has he kind of known for quite a while and has just been sort of pretending he doesn't for his own sanity? Has he known for a while, or did he really literally just kind of lamp to it this late in the story? And it is, as you said, there was no big reveal. It was just kind of like one day we see him thinking, is Tayama actually Yamada? It's like, well, duh. And the last question then, and there's only two you have to answer because you already answered one. Does she realize that he suspects or knows the truth, do you think? How much of an inkling do you think, as at the current moment in the story, how much of an inkling does she have that he knows?
I feel like I'm led to believe that he kind of only realized this semi-recently. I think it probably times with the gradual shift of his affection going towards the Tayama rather than Yamada. Because there is a point where you realize, oh wait, he's not blushing over the girl at the till anymore. Like, he's not thinking about her anymore. And their interactions become kind of just more friendly. I think that probably... Yeah, so around the time where he vocalizes it, I would say just not long before that. Because how much time's actually passed in real time? I think it's probably like a year and a half, something like that. I remember they mentioned a year.
I would have even guessed less, but you might be right. It's a year and a half, something like that.
They did mention at one point that it's been a year since I entered the store, something like that. So just over a year. So I think it is actually a recent development, which is a little bit silly, but I kind of forgive it now because it has gone for more of a softer, more emotional revelation about it than something played just for shits and giggles. Yamada, she already, from what I gathered, she already knows that Sasaki knows because she has that moment where he's carrying her and in her state of being asleep or playing into it, like taking that moment as a chance to be vulnerable. She basically says, like, just keep playing along. She's not ready for him to ask the question. So yeah, and I think that was a really interesting development. Actually, I really appreciated that because we're going to continue this premise. I think probably not for too long. I would guess maybe like another volume or so, and then it is going to come eventually, and it's going to be, I think, quite cathartic coming together for them. And then I actually, off the back of that, then I have a question back to you. Do you think? And this is a realization both of them have to come to. Do you think they're going to realize that they actually did meet each other 8 years ago? And
eventually.
Yeah, because that is the only part. I don't think it actually affects the weirdness of that dynamic, because that's when she started working there when she was 16.
Right.
But that like scene that they have, there's no romantic element to that whatsoever.
No, I didn't find that uncomfortable. No.
It was such a like passing moment that neither of them actually remember, which is one that I'm like, okay, now once that gets addressed, I feel like that is when we're in the closing section, which maybe you're right, maybe if it is going to be 2 cores or something like that, then the ending could be on the horizon, because it is acknowledging that I don't know if the series can keep going on once it gets really serious with these sorts of developments.
Yeah, I think that's an open question. I also think it's an open question whether she was really quote unquote sleep talking when she said those things.
I didn't think she was. No.
Yeah, I think, yeah. And the fact that she said them implies that she knows he knows. So they're
Hmm.
really kind of they're both playing, they're doing a pantomime at this point, to use a term you Brits would be familiar with. But, so yeah, okay. So let's talk a little bit briefly before we get into the wrap up here of this. There are a couple of sporting characters we haven't talked about. One of them is a mangaka, a shoujo mangaka named Nishizono, who is friends with the manager Goto-san and a semi-regular customer, and ends up her dog Daigoro ends up becoming kind of an influence in the story, and she becomes a sort of a confidant for Sasaki, actually, to the point where I felt like maybe the things we were pointing towards, they were going to say, okay, the relationship is not realistic because of the age difference, and let's pair him off with Nishizono, and then Yamada, she ends up. There's another character named Obata who's a young man who works at the store who's likewise in his early 20s, and he's the really really socially awkward one that I referenced earlier, and he ends up actually becoming sort of friends with Kami-san. I thought maybe we might be headed towards a pairing off with her and Yamada, although I feel that less now. And then, of course, Kami-san herself, it's strongly implied, is interested in Yamada romantically. So, do you feel like any of these other ships has any chance of leaving port, or they're just being kind of thrown out there as distractions, and we all know where this is headed?
No, no, I don't think any of them are going to happen. If anything, I think the opposite of all of them is going to happen. I think Sasaki and Yamada feels like what is going to happen, what should happen. Obata also has this respect for his boss, Goto. I don't know if that's actually going to develop in any real way, but I think maybe we'll see more of real connection between them developing. It's touched on it, and we've had moments of them. Um, Chapters focusing on that. So I think we could just continue with that. I think Kami is going to just be this figure that is just between it all. And at this point, she has accepted Sasaki for who he is and what he represents for Yamada.
Hmm.
So yeah, I actually quite liked that race scene that she had with Sasaki. I think that was a good moment for both of their characters to
Yeah, I did.
push
I
the,
did too, actually.
and the fact that she came to a realization, I was like, oh yeah, I'm a brat, but also I'm kind of socially inept at this making friends thing. So there was like an
Hmm.
acknowledgement in her behavior, which I was like, you know what, that's fine. I'm okay with her in that sense. And then the other one that I would
Well,
mention is you can't forget the old lady Yuri. If
hmm.
anything, I think the Nishizono character is there's this sort of fondness she has for Ono, the old lady, right, cash register lady. I don't know if it's going to be played seriously either, but I think that's a cute little dynamic that I wouldn't be surprised
Hmm.
if in the final chapter, when you actually wrap up Sasaki and Yamada, that you like cut to them like in a bar together, being like oh, oh, oh. And then yeah, I think that may be the like most that we'll get from that side, but
Oh,
yeah.
that's interesting. That's an interesting angle. Okay. Well, yeah, that's an interesting angle. Just looping quickly back to Kami-san. I mean, her role is a very well established romantic comedy role. She is the irritant that is necessary for the oyster to make a pearl. That's what she is. That's the role she fills in the story, and as such, she's kind of designed to be irritating. So in that sense, I guess it's not her fault. And I did like that race scene too. I thought that was quite good. The other thing I would just want to say before we jump into the recommendations is Sasaki himself. His life is a mess. He works in a basically, if it's not a black company, he certainly works for an abusive boss who abuses him, and well, that's what abusive people do, but generally belittles him. And he sort of is someone who, even though his subordinates really like and respect him, he doesn't like and respect himself. And I think the abuse from his boss has a lot to do with that. And I kind of feel like before he can go anywhere with Yamada, he kind of has to figure this out. He has to get to a better place himself before he can get into seriously thinking about any sort of a relationship. So quickly, your thoughts on that. I mean, do you think? I mean, Sasaki, don't you do you think it will happen in the story, and do you think it should happen where he has to have some kind of a personal revelation where he overcomes his own demons that have nothing to do with Yamada, that have only to do with his view, his self-worth, and his life.
Yeah, I mean, we've been building up to this, what feels like his version of his tragic backstory with his ex coworker. I will say, I'm just not sold on that. There's something about it where I'm like,
I agree.
okay,
I agree.
it's a bit making a big deal out of it, something that's not. But then again, that is something that even Yamada points out with his. But I do think there is a little bit of a writing flaw in that sense because it's just not super compelling. But I think what it's building up to is he's going to come full circle on that. Whether we're going to see some him reuniting with his co-worker, even though he feels like this is not something that can ever happen, or he's just going to apply it to his current mindset, which seems so different from what he tells us he was like 8 years ago. I think that is going to come very soon, in line with him. Probably that will come, and then it will result in him initiating this conversation with Yamada and actually pushing for some romantic progress between them, because he probably feels like this is a roadblock that he can't address. He can't.
I think he needs a catharsis with his boss, though, is also, I think, a part of this, and I don't know if that's going to happen. But
I would
can't.
I would think not, because the thing this series does as well, which I'm back and forth on it. If a character is not relevant, the face is not drawn. There are even characters where, like, you have this young girl who works at his company who, like,
that's
idolizes
true.
him. And then you also have a young new cash register person working, and you never see her face either. And I'm like, okay, the author is telling us these people don't really matter. So no, I don't. I don't know if we
Okay.
are going to get that actually.
I agree with you. We're not going to get it, but I think that would be. I don't think we're going to get it, and I think that will be a narrative mistake when we don't. Because in Sasaki's position, I don't think he can ever have a healthy relationship or a healthy life as long as he's in that relationship with his boss. That's just my honest opinion. That's something. Maybe there's more of a gaman feeling in Japan. That's like, okay, well, part of being a grown up and being a man is you get treated like shit at work and you just deal with it and you deal with it and you cope and you die of a heart attack at 60 or whatever. But I don't buy that from a psychological standpoint. And I think that will be a flaw in the story if that isn't addressed. It is true. I confess I hadn't really thought about it, but you're right. The boss's face is never really shown, which does strongly suggest he's an NPC. I mean, so well, that's interesting. Anyway, okay, that's cool. All right, so unless you have anything else you want to jump into, I think we're ready for recommendations here.
Go for it.
All right. Well, I'm going to let you go first because I have some comments to make on your recommendation choice, and I know you have more than one too. So I'm going to let you take the floor first. What are your recommendations for Smoking Behind the Supermarket with You?
Yeah, you're gonna let me go first so you can complain. I see how it is. Okay, I have, like I said, I had like 4 or 5 picks I could have gone with, and I managed to get it down to 2 because I just think there isn't one series that completely feels like I can recommend it in every way. My 2 series are Kowloon Generic Romance by Jun Mayuzuki and Katsai by Tsukasa Hojo. Quite a recent series, and then also a classic from the 80s, a Weekly Shonen Jump title. One for the vibe.
Which has an anime coming up, by the way.
It does.
A remake anime, a second anime, I should say.
Yeah, Weekly Shonen Jump has plenty of them coming at the moment. Kowloon Generic Romance, I think, fits the vibe, it fits the style. There's something off-kilter about the main duo for different reasons in that series, very obviously. But there is sort of like an alluring dynamic, and I don't want to say power between them, but like the knowledge and how they play off of each other. And also there's plenty of smoking scenes in that series as well.
Yes.
For the cool vibe. So yeah, definitely that one for more of the vibe. Cat's Eye, because it has a similar premise that feels a little bit unbelievable, where you're like, okay, this girl that you love is this other person, but you can't see it, which you kind of have to suspend your disbelief. And similar to Cat's Eye, with this series, I kind of was eventually won over because I thought the character, like the romance potential between the characters, was charming enough that I kind of forgot it. But Cat's Eye very much acknowledges it as an ongoing thing as well. But yeah, so that's my two recommendations. One that's ongoing and one that finished a long time ago, but will be coming out next
Long
season
time
as
ago.
well.
For the record, I know Kowloon generic romance very well, but I had never have never read Cat's Eye and did not watch the first anime, which aired I think in the late '80s or something. My plan was indeed to watch the remake when that it's actually an ONA, but effectively it's an anime series. So I am definitely going to check that out. Now my pick is Koiwa Ameagari no Yoni, After the Rain, ironically by Jun Mayuzuki. And it's interesting because my evolution on this, my initial thought was After the Rain. That was the one that immediately came to mind because it's about a potential relationship between a young girl, even younger, in that case, a senior in high school, and an older man, not just, I think, as I recall, just barely 40 or 41, who is her manager at the restaurant where she works. And but the more I thought about it, honestly, and I'm just going to go full disclosure here, the more I thought about this, the more it was actually, I realized that Kowloon Generic Romance is actually the Mayuzuki series that has the more similar vibe, the more similar feel, and ironically, even probably the more similar dynamic between the two leads, even though the age gap is much less. However, for the little how the sausage is made moment for our listener viewers, is we have a little document that we populate with the stuff we're going to talk about, and one of the blanks in there when we know we're going to do a series is the recommendation section. And even though I had been kind of more or less settled on Kowloon for a while, I didn't put it on the damn sheet. So Samu beat me to it with no ill intent whatsoever. He had no idea I was even considering it. So I have to say, just in full disclosure terms, Kowloon Generic Romance is the series. Kowloon Generic Romance, that's what I know, is in fact the Mayuzuki series that I think is the most accurate recommendation. However, After the Rain, it's a wonderful series. It does have a very compelling potential romantic relationship between a very young woman and an older man that also has just a wonderful non-romantic aspect to it. Her feelings about him, his feelings about her, the way she kind of represents kind of a vibrancy and a life force, which is a little bit similar to what we get in Smoking Behind the Supermarket. But again, I think this just must be a Mayuzuki thing, a series that has a really big time interest in smoking. She loves to depict smoking. I'm not sure there's any other anime in recent years that has more smoking than Kowloon Generic Romance, or a series where smoking is more kind of literally plot relevant. But there is quite a bit of smoking in After the Rain too, because he smokes, and the fact that he smokes is something that she doesn't particularly approve of. Which is kind of natural, you think, for an 18-year-old girl, probably thinks it's gross, and she's right. So, a big day for Mayuzuki June. Two recommendations, both of them excellent series, both of them, I think, good fits for Smoking Behind the Supermarket with you. Although, if I'm honest, Kowloon Generic Romance probably even the closer match. And lastly, as our viewer listeners will know, is the final overview scoring section where we give the series a rank out of 100. I will go first this time. And like you, Samu, I grew to like the series more as it progressed and did find the last volume or so probably to be the most engaging of the entire series. I was I kind of had the feeling that it was a pleasant trifle, really, for most of the run, that it was just a fun series, interesting without a lot of depth to it. And it's only within the last, of the 52 released chapters, I would say probably the last 15 to 20 chapters where we really started to get, I felt, something a little more meaningful and meaty on the bone. So I'm going to give this series 77 out of 100. That is my score for Smoking Behind the Supermarket with You. And Samu, what is your score?
I'm not far off you. Yes, I feel like my enjoyment of the series is exponentially increasing as it goes on. I quite enjoyed it for what it was presented originally. I feel like that sort of series would have worked at maybe like 3 volumes, and I think that could have wrapped up quite nicely. So yeah, there was a dip that it took, but it is now kind of overtaking where it actually was in the beginning, and I suspect it's going to go even higher in my estimations by the time it does wrap up, because I do feel like it's a sort of series where the best material might actually come in the shape of the last chapter, this cathartic coming together of all these different feelings that they have, and also the like burdens they're carrying that's holding them back. So at the moment, I'm giving it 79. So I'm quite close to where you are.
Okay.
But I wouldn't be surprised if I'm 80 something by the time it ends.
I'll concur with that. I think it has the potential to go a little higher for me if it goes the direction I think it might. And I do think, again, my gut feeling is telling me it's pretty close to the end. I think when that cathartic moment comes, I don't think it's a series that continues past that point much. I think that really is the logical place to conclude it. Although, who knows? I've been surprised before, and it is a big seller, and editors can be very persuasive. So that, my friends, is our My Taste is Better Than Yours look at Super no Ura de Yani Futari, Smoking Behind the Supermarket with You by Jinushi. And Samu, as always, thank you very much.
Thank you. I was going to make a joke and be like, I'm going to take a smoke break, but I can't even admit that I would do that because smoking's gross. Smoking's gross.
I can't either because my smoke break would be like an hour because that's how long it takes me to smoke a cigar. And so that wouldn't work either. So anyway, thank you everybody for watching. Thank you for listening. Let's do the old actionables here. If you could comment, if you would subscribe, that would be deeply, deeply appreciated. And as always, thanks for tuning in. And we will see you in the very next episode of My Taste is Better Than Yours. Until that time comes, stay frosty. Thanks a lot.